So, okay, I want people to learn how to feel their feelings. It sounds really basic.
No, that's perfect, and I think that's great for people to just take a pause in that moment.
Like, you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. You don't know different. You don't have the cognitive capacity to understand. You just have the immediate, like, oh, I need to protect myself against whatever the feeling is.
Oftentimes we do that in childhood in survival. I've got to separate
100%.
me from me to survive. But then that
100%.
thing that served us now works against us because we've separated ourselves from ourselves. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Changer Podcast. My name is Michelle Dutro, and I am thrilled beyond measure for my conversation today with Michael Ostrolenk. I had to interrupt myself. We were chatting before I hit record and said, okay, we don't have to stop talking. I need to stop talking because I'm so excited to talk to Michael today about topics related to resilience, which he is a master of, because I think it is timely and is what is needed given the current state of affairs that we are all in addition to the fact that we are recording this on 9/11, which has its own impact for many people. I myself was a firefighter during 9/11, so I have my own attachment to this day, and I know many people do. That said, let's just take a step back here. Let me introduce Michael to you. His journey began at age 9 when he discovered meditation, guided imagery, and biofeedback as tools for managing his inner world. I didn't even start biofeedback as a practitioner until I was in my 30s, so way jump on me on that one. That early spark grew into lifelong exploration of the mind, body, and spirit. He went on to become a licensed marriage and family therapist and transpersonal specialization, advanced training in somatic psychology, and became a certified coach through NYU. All of these things we're going to touch on here in this conversation as it relates to resilience, because they all touch on it in some way and matter. His path also took him to arenas far beyond traditional therapy, serving as a master coach at Seal Fit's Unbeatable Mind Academy, to his role as director of human resilience at, now, Michael, correct me here, is it Aperon? How do you say that?
Aperon Zoe means limitless in Greek.
That's it, limitless, the leading edge of science, technology, and conscious evolution, which I'm sure is what has led him to his amazing company now, Resilience Optimized, which is why, again, I'm so thrilled to talk to Michael today. His rare combination of skills, from somatics and transpersonal psychology to tactical training, non-ordinary states of consciousness, and high-performance coaching. He's a fellow at the Center for Cognitive Liberty and Ethics, also important today, a seasoned podcaster and guide to those seeking to expand resilience and unlock extraordinary human potential. Michael, what did I leave out that you would like to add to that?
Wow. First of all, Michelle, thanks for having me on. I love the introduction. I appreciate that. The only thing I might add, and this is not even introduction for me, but as you mentioned, it's 9/11. But it's also, I want to recognize Benghazi happened on 9/11 as well, and the loss of 4 Americans.
And these events, and I'm just going to show you here. So I sent Michael ahead of time, as I do with guests. Here are the pages of questions. Hey, Michael, here's the things we're going to chat about. And I can tell you they are not completely out the window, but for the most part out the window because of the events of this week. And I would be remiss, I know Michael would feel the same way, to not address head on the 2 events of this week alone. The very sad and tragic murder. Her name is Irina Zarutskov, the Ukrainian gal in North Carolina who was stabbed for no reason whatsoever. And then the loss of Charlie Kirk being assassinated in real time at the recording of this just yesterday. And what I want to talk about in this show in particular, especially as it relates to resilience, is not the events. This is not a political podcast. And there's those that are out there and, jump into those and get involved in the areas that you see fit. This is even though this is also largely a mental health podcast, I'm not talking about mental health as it relates to the people who did the acts. That also is its whole separate thing. What I want to chat with Michael about today is our response to these events. And to me, that is what addresses resilience, is when a situation occurs that is not of our choosing, that is out of our control, that makes us feel threatened or in harm's way or goes against the grain of our being, we have to react or respond in some way, shape, or form. And that response is an indicator of our level of resilience, whether we
Mhm.
have resilience to bounce back, have that emotional regulation, or we don't and we lose it. And losing it before, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong here, used to be reserved for road rage, the military, first responders, people under tremendous pressure. We'd think, oh, they have PTSD and they snapped. And now you see it in social media in real time to how people are commenting about these incidents, people cheering or applauding as though anyone deserved this, regardless of how different your opinion is. It was an indicator to me all night last night watching this to say, how did we lose our way? What is happening here with humanity? Because if you look at the folks making these comments, I know they're good people. I know
Mhm.
they have a good heart. I know they love their family. I know they're assumedly a good parent, a good brother, a sister, a daughter, whatever it is. And yet we have these triggers, and these reactions are like nothing I had seen prior to COVID.
Mhm.
COVID was kind of a shift for, I think, humanity, for how we react to one another, the division between people. And so, all of that said, Michael, from your expertise across the board, from training Navy SEALs and really high end folks to marriage and family therapy, where it's kind of the common couple, resilience is resilience. How do you see that? How do you explain resilience when you're working with anybody who crosses your path and says, I feel like I could use some help here? And then we're going to get into tactics and things people can do a little later in the podcast. But right now, I would just love, from your perspective, for the audience to hear. So we are dealing with a level playing ground. What does resilience mean, and what does it look like?
So the way I think about it, and I talk about resilience redefined, so I'm kind of redefining what resilience means, at least in the work that I do. And I look at it through kind of three different pillars. One is intrapsychically, what's happening inside the individual. I look at emotional resilience, mental resilience, and physical resilience, as well as spiritual resilience. And it's okay with you, I'll walk through each one of those. But let me just name the other two. The second one is interpersonal resilience. How do you build resilient relationships between two or more people? And then how do you take a leadership role so you can show up in the community to support your community? What it literally could be your family, but it literally could be the community, the state, the nation state, the world, whatever the scale is for you, in a more resilient way, recognizing that there are global and local challenges that we need to step up and deal with. But let me start with the individual. That's cool with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So resilience, I'm never one to say repress your emotions because I'm trained as a therapist. You repress your emotions, one or two things comes out sideways as passive aggressive behavior, which no one likes, or it can come out in the long run as chronic health conditions, the mind body connection. We don't want that either. So I'd never say you should repress your emotions. What I would say is you need to learn to experience fully, manage, and help express your emotions. To me, that's brilliant. And what that might look like is any like when clients come to me, I always ask them what emotions were wrong or disallowed in your family. And a lot of people say, "Oh, my father would say I'll give you something to cry about." So I'm like, "Oh, I can't be sad," or like only my father can be, so I can't have my anger, so I withheld my anger. But it's not just the so-called negative emotions. People will come out of origin, and the message is like, "There's nothing to be happy about." Oh, I can't have joy. I can't have happiness. I can't have bliss, pleasure. Like, there's a whole bunch of programs from family of origin, and our culture tells us what's appropriate, what's not in terms of expressing, even feeling certain things. So, okay, I work with people to learn how to feel their feelings. And it sounds really basic, but it's amazing to me, and I'm not surprised because I've done this for years, but how difficult it is for some people to actually feel, even know their emotions are alone, to feel them. So I can keep going on that path. If that's okay, kind of unpack that, Michelle. Is that good?
No, that's perfect. And I think that's great for people to just take a pause in that moment, because I agree with you. Even when people say, I'm just so angry, how do you know that that emotion you're feeling is anger? Where do you feel that in your body? Where does that resonate with you? And it's just a term that people get in the habit of saying, and it may not be, it may be hurt, it may actually be sadness, right? And so I love what you're saying, because we have detached our language from our truth, from our physical being, from knowing how do I feel things. And I know that you know this, that oftentimes we do that in childhood in survival. I've got to separate me
100%.
from me to survive. But then that thing
100%.
that served us now works against us, because we've separated ourselves from ourselves. So, yes,
You,
wholeheartedly agree.
you, you stole my thunder because, like, what
Oh,
I will say, it's wonderful. Is what I'll say to my clients is like, hey, that's a great concept. I'm angry. Okay, that's words in our head. How do you know? Like you just said, like, and I'll have them, and a lot of people have very little conception of what, not conception, experience of what it's like to live
yeah.
between their toes to their throat. And like, okay, you just when you get what you call angry or whatever the emotion is, how do you experience it in your body? And after I'll make it up because everyone's unique to themselves, but like, heartbeat gets faster. They might hold their breath, anger. They might clench their jaw, their shoulders get tight, stomach gets tight, GI area gets tight, however they do what they do. And what I will do with people is once they realize how they contract against certain emotions, including happiness, pleasure, joy, bliss, not just, the so-called negative emotions, through somatic practices, I help them deconstruct the armor they've created to protect them against certain feelings. As you perfectly said, we did that as little children because it was too scary to feel certain things, because these big people, most likely big people in front of us, could literally perception kill us, or a real big threat to us. We couldn't feel certain things, let alone express those certain things. Perceptual. Not necessarily your parents are going to kill you, but in some cases that might be true. But like, you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. You don't know different. You don't have the cognitive capacities to understand. You just have the immediate like, oh, I need to protect myself against whatever the feeling is. So first thing is like, how do you just allow it, deconstruct the armor slowly, because you develop the defense mechanisms for a particular reason. Without the inner capacities and resources to deal effectively with them, you don't want the flooding, and like people can't. It's overwhelming and they can't handle it. So I help them deconstruct the armor very slowly and develop the inner resources to sit with whatever arises. And that's the key. Feel it, allow it to arise, sit with it as long as you can. And here in the States, we easily find a million distractions: Netflix, Pornhub, YouTube, alcohol, drugs, work out, whatever the things we do to like, I don't want to feel certain things. So what I'll work with clients on is like, okay, let's feel that for 5 minutes. If you need to distract yourself, as long as you're not hurting yourself, okay. Next time 6 minutes, next time 7 minutes, next time 8 minutes. Just increase your capacity. That's resilience. Because the more you can sit with your own experience, there's wisdom. I mean, your body is literally trying to tell you something about yourself, about the relationship, about the environment that's really valuable for you to be aware of, as opposed to numb out and doing the thing that you do to distract yourself. So that's just the allowing. I'll stop there for a
No, no,
second.
that's great. Tell me this: how do you see in that same vein someone who won't sit with an emotion, or they can feel it coming on? Someone says something, someone does something, and it's just an immediate reaction. It's an immediate shutdown. It's immediate. You're wrong. Stop talking. You know what I mean? Um, how do you see that being the same way of a lack of resilience? Because when someone says something, we can't just sit with, that's their opinion. I wonder how they got there. I wonder what their belief structure is for them. I wonder if they're even saying something based on what I said. And did I come across wrong? I wonder if that was even not in true. All that takes time that
Oh,
you just said. If we're so quick to distract, or we're so quick to shut down and say you're wrong and I'm right, would you agree that all of that would be an indicator of we have some resilience work to do and some emotional regulation to do, because you have over time developed this habit of a brick wall of not allowing someone else and not allowing your own feelings?
I need you to write my PR for me because like you just articulate a lot of what I do talk about really, really well. So I work with I work with individuals. I co-lead a men's group with JC Glick, and I also work with couples. And you just like articulated perfectly my conversation with couples because the way I think about it, I realize after I'm doing this for 30 years, like when I work with a couple, I have to work with them individually too, a lot, because the way I look at it is four things within the individual that need to be not perfected, but worked on in order for the relationship to work. And one of them is healing old wounds. Because if your partner can be the nicest, kindest, and most loving person in the world, and you're going to interpret whatever they do in a negative light, a reactive thing. So healing is required. Self-regulation, and we just kind of walk through a little bit of that. In the moment you're in, and I love the way you just articulate. Like if most couples did what you just said, oh wait, let me reflect on what you just said and see what my role might be causing part of what you just shared. But am I misinterpreting all that stuff? Is like awesome, but most people don't do that. So like on a self-regulation front, I work with clients to give them a whole bunch of techniques to begin to regulate themselves as so let's just say that there's a conflict and 30 minutes into the conflict, let's just say 45 minutes, the conflict's over after 30 minutes. 45 minutes in, they realize like, oh, I got triggered, I got activated. All right, so at that time it's a little bit easier to do relation techniques, the breath work, the posture work, the mantra, changing the mindset. But you start doing it backwards. You start doing it backwards. And eventually, this takes time, this takes practice. This is very un American. It's not Amazon oriented where you get it yesterday, but like eventually you get to the point where you're about to get activated, or if you want to use the popular word, triggered. And you're like, oh, I see it happening. My stomach's getting tight. My breath is getting shallow. The visual imagery that comes up when I'm angry comes up, or when I'm shutting down, or whatever my defense mechanism is. And you have that moment, you can pause, and then you can start intervening through breath, through posture, through the mantra, whatever happens to be, and slowly stop that automatic reaction. But it takes time. So healing old wounds, regulating the nervous system in the middle of, or towards the end, or towards the beginning eventually. For me, a third piece of evolution of consciousness. There's like 21 lines of development: emotional, moral, cognitive, et cetera, et cetera. And you map where people are at and you realize what's the next stage for them, and you help them get there. So like you just kind of map out the levels of development and like what's the next possible iteration for them, the next thing for them, and develop exercises to bring them. And the fourth one, this is one of my actually favorite because it's most people are like, what? Human optimization. So when I work with couples in this case, if you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, you're not moving, you're not dealing with your stress, it's really hard to be loving, caring, compassionate, and listen to your partner. You just feel like shit. I'm sorry if I'm cussing. I don't know if you know, but so like, okay, so I will literally work with my couples, also individuals, on sleep. Let's get dial in your sleep. Let's dial in your diet for you and your bio individuality. Let's get some movement practices in there, some fitness in there, circadian biology. Teach them how to live within 24-hour day-night cycles, the effects of artificial light and artificial drugs like caffeine, nicotine, THC, all the sleep medications we have, just so people are educated and they can understand like what happens. Even food is drugged, at some points for some people at some time. So, I help them dial those things in. That way they feel better. That way they can show up differently in their relationship. That is also resilience. Like you feel like crap, you can willpower yourself through stuff, and we do. And it's good to develop the willpower, but it's also really, really good to dial on your sleep, your fitness, your movement, the stress management, circadian biology, all the stuff I work through. So like all those things, heal old wounds, regulate your nervous system, evolve your consciousness, and then optimize your human system. All those things are an aspect for me of human resilience for the individual.
Perfect. So let's stop on that for a second. I talk a lot about decision making,
Mm.
and it's a heck of a lot easier to slow down and make a right decision in real time than a year out have to undo every single domino effect that happened because of that bad decision. Whether that's, and we'll go big, not small here, but taking the wrong job, marrying the wrong person, Phil at moving to the wrong location, whatever it is, that now life in that trickle down effect is 97,000 other problems because you made that one incorrectly. And whenever that one incorrect one, I ask every single person, tell me what was going on in your world when you made that decision.
That's great. That's
And
really, really good.
absolutely right with, where were you physically? Right. And so all of the things that encompass our being and our state of mind and our mental health and our emotional health and our spiritual well-being, if all of that is not optimized to the highest level it can be, the odds of you making good decisions every minute of every day continue to diminish depending on how far off that optimization you are. And it's funny that the small decisions, ones we don't even think about, can wind up having monumental impacts. I was just listing the big categories, but they all matter. Turning left or turning right, they all matter. So on this topic, before we leave it, because I really want to address what is going on with these responses on social media, whether it's these big events that we're talking about right now, these recent the assassination and murder that took place, but they happen all the time. So all of the things, all the way down to someone on social media that you went to high school with 40 years ago, that who knows why you're even following them on Facebook, that makes some political comment, and you are messaging back in a second. Again, no pause, no check-in, no thought. And it is become the norm in society.
Yeah.
And it can't all be someone else who's doing it. At some point, that someone else finger pointing has got to at some point we have to take responsibility. And if anybody listening could walk away with one aspect of this conversation when it comes to reacting in real time to somebody in front of you, whether that's your relationship or your boss or your coworker, especially online, if you are not taking a moment to check in with yourself to say, is this the best version of me who's responding in this moment? Because at the end of the day, when your head hits the pillow and you reflect back to everything you said, everything you did, and in every way you showed up, if there's any part of you that has regret, if there's any part of you that says, not so proud of that, or I may have to go back and hit the delete button on that comment, again, having to undo bad decisions. If you could give people very quick tools, quick check-ins to say, hey, when you see or read anything that you instantly are feeling the need to say something back or feeling the need to type something back, do this quick check-in. It's less than a minute. I'm assuming it is. I have no idea. I did not prep Michael to say, come up with something that is a minute or less. So let's hope there is something out there, because people don't have longer than that, right? We're a microwave society. So what is a quick check-in that people can do to say, I'm going to check in with all these things, and as long as I know I'm good here, then I'm going to respond rather than react. But what are those personal check-ins we can do to keep ourselves in check before we make a problem bigger than what it needs to be?
Man, that's a great question. So I'd answer at least three things that come to my mind immediately. One is breath. Literally, like breath, you want to have a pause between your thoughts and your actions. This is helpful not just on political topics on social media, but with your, if you're married, with your partner, your kids, your boss, your underlings, whatever happens to be. Something occurs, literally take 30 seconds to take a couple slow, deep abdominal breaths. Well, because what that does is it calms the nervous system down, gives you more access to the prefrontal cortex, so you can make better decisions, so you don't say dumb shit, basically, or do dumb shit. So breath, 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 breath. And I always encourage all my clients to practice breath work all the time. Like before meetings, in line at the bank, driving their car. Don't close your eyes when you're driving the car, but you can still do breath work without the eyes closed. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and I mentioned spirituality. And for me, spirituality has a couple different meanings, but I'll stick with the meaning around character traits or values. You know, be clear on what your values are. I know the hell out of my clients going to say from abstract to concrete. If you just say, oh, well, one of my values or core principles is loving, nice, but what does that actually mean? What are the behaviors that indicate that you're being a loving, caring, compassionate person, or taking a stand, or being courageous, or character traits that are important to you? Be clear on what they are, be as they are, and check yourself against them, whether they're religiously inspired, secularly inspired, wherever they come from. Check yourself against them. And what I'm about to do, I embody my values. I'd say that's the second thing. Breath, your values, your principles, core values, principles. And the third thing is curiosity. I like to Wilbur is an old friend, but also someone I work with him, and he's written like 20 books. And he's a philosopher, integral philosopher, and one of the things he talks about is everyone has limited but partial truth. I always think about that. Like, oh, that's true, which I believe it is, because we're not God, we're not omniscient, we have limitations as human beings. If that's true, then maybe my perspective on this particular topic is very. I just don't have enough information or perspective. My worldview is not broad enough to really understand that all that's going on. And I believe that to be true. Doesn't mean I don't have my stance. I take on certain things. Curiosity, ask questions, especially if you're in a relationship and you're talking to your wife or your husband. Like, instead of just making assumptions and trying to mind read, and exactly what they mean, I'm going to take a stand and tit for tat them. Like, oh, what? I'm just really, really curious. This is what I heard you say. Is this what you meant? Is this what your intentions are? That can save a lot of marriages. But even that, if you try to engage someone on politics, for instance, and just try to understand where they're coming from. And let me just do a little caveat, if that's okay.
Sure.
Not, it wasn't in my bio, but one of the things besides being a therapist and a coach for 30 years, I spent 20 years doing partisan public policy. Nothing to do with the trans movement. Transpartisan means through and beyond the partisan. I was hired by foundations and nonprofits to do retreats. We brought libertarians, conservatives, and progressives together, a wide variety of topics, find common ground, launch campaigns that are across the political spectrum, and then move them into the body politic. So I spent a lot of time liberals and libertarians and conservatives and progressives and greens, everyone. Part of the curiosity thing doing the political thing, besides actually asking the other person, not to prove a point. You can ask questions to make them, because you're in your mind you're going to lead them to a path and make them see how dumb they are. That's not the intent. You want to understand why they believe what they believe. Yeah, that's really the key. That's the transpartisan impulse. Ooh, why do you believe that? Where does that come from? And it's pretty fascinating, because what I found is if you track people's origin stories, you understand for the most part where their politics come from. Not always, but it's there might be a connection there. So like you get to learn more about them, you learn their worldview, why they believe what they believe. Okay, in the transpartisan work, I always recommended people. I did it for 20 years. If you're a conservative, great. Read all the other folks. Read Z magazines. Reading Noam Chomsky. Read Reason magazines. Libertarian. Um, God, there's some back in the day. There's a lot of magazines. I don't know more, but like literally, I would get about 18 magazines a month, all across the political spectrum. And I have my particular belief, but I want to understand their means and the ends. What are the ends they seek and the means that they get there? And I want to understand their worldviews for two reasons. One, because I want to expand my own because I'm limited, but also, well, three reasons. that if I'm going to organize people across the political spectrum, I have to understand where they're coming from and themselves in the slot, because I don't have to, and I'll give you an example if you like, but so how to help people work together. And the third one, it actually strengthens my own position. I can debate, not in a cruel, mean, stupid way. Original intent behind debate. Like, I have my stance, you have yours. I understand where you're coming from. Hopefully, you understand where I'm coming from. Then we can debate ideas, which we can't really do these much. Unfortunately, this much anymore. I would say that is a really good of the like. You put those three things together, be really good steps for people to take.
So let's stop on values. And it's pretty funny. Now we get
Yeah.
to switch the roles around because now I get to say, oh, wow, thanks for talking from my playbook. Because
Nice.
and I put it in writing here. Obviously, you didn't see my notes because I just wrote them before we started chatting. But on the list of what makes up, just Googling general things, what makes up resilience, emotional regulation, optimism, strong social support, sense of purpose, I added, and this is what you just spoke to. Well, I added decision making. We already talked about that, but values and what matters to you. I don't know how anyone can have true resilience without understanding what their values are so that the
Hmm.
actions they take, they can benchmark and say, are they aligned? Is
Yes.
what I'm doing aligned with what I believe in? And I love your point, especially right now during all of this, and like really for the last 5 years, is for folks that value compassion and understanding and don't live one moment in that. Don't react that way. Don't interact that way. Don't show up that way. And then there has to be a moment of self reflection, which we can't do if we're busy all the time. We can't do if we choose distraction all the time. You got to have a moment of self reflection to say, if, and this is my thing, if I watched you on a webcam for 3 days out of your life, I just watch everywhere you go, every interaction you have. I should be able to identify your top 5 values because how you live is what you value. How you communicate is what you value. Do you value understanding and compassion, or do you value the need to be right?
Mhm.
Because it's going to dictate your outcome every single time. And so it's interesting in self-awareness of what do you value and what do you wish you valued? Because there's a big delta between how we wish we were and how we actually are. And if you were to write down your 5 values and then ask people that you're around all the time, what do you think my values are?
That'd be a great exercise for
What do
people.
you
I
think
love.
they are? Because they're going to
Yeah, yeah,
base that
yeah,
on how you live your life, how they see you
yeah,
showing up.
yeah, yeah.
And if they were being honest and they said, "Well, I think you value being right." And you have on your list understanding and compassion, there's a miss here somewhere. And so I love what you're saying because I don't know how we can have resilience and that ability to bounce back in whatever comes our way without saying, here's what matters to me, and
Hmm.
I'm going to make sure that I live into that every day. And your comment about wounds, when our methodology for healing our wounds is that the line that hurt people is
Hmm.
is that we are justifying our behavior because of how mistreated we were,
Hmm.
and this was a lot of the movement in that North Carolina murder when they started that GoFundMe for him, not her, was he's been so wronged in the mental health arena and by the police department, that we're going to start a GoFundMe to help with his, criminal defense on what he did. But we're mixing concepts here. We have an absolute issue with mental health in the United States across the board that has not been addressed. And it used to just be mental health was, as you know, veterans and first responders. And then it moved into healthcare. Boy, those folks on the front lines through COVID really need mental health help. And then it was the big push on homeless folks. Well, all the people that are homeless, really what they need is mental health help. So what are we doing there? Well, now it's quite frankly everybody. The reality is everybody is struggling in some way, shape, or form. And if we need mental health help, that is a very real thing. If we need the police department to act in a way that if they're on webcams all the time, which they all should have cameras for their own protection and for the protection of the public for both sides, if that's happening, if we know then that people are being accountable, then really what we're saying is at the end of the day, this behavior that happened can't be correct. Murder cannot be something that we justify, or we have become an uncivilized people. We have moved back in time. And when we start living in a world that we justify all bad behavior, commenting on people's social media posts, and we justify our behavior for 20,000 different reasons, we've lost our way. So I'm going to bring this back full circle on how this started, which is, I think that all of us, and I'm not leaving anyone out, and I'm not categorizing any, I am 100% of all people. I'm going to put everybody in this same bucket. We've lost our way a bit. And we've gotten out of touch with everything you and I are speaking about. What matters, what our values are, personal responsibility for how we show up, personal responsibility for understanding why we feel in this moment the way we feel, and having our own understanding of what is going on with me. Why does that hurt me? Why does that frustrate me? Why does that anger me? What is happening with me, this wound thing, before I make my problem and dump it on you and now make it your problem? And
100%.
so I would love here, and you and I could talk. I mean, holy cow, you've talked on 20 different points saying, hey, we could elaborate on, this could be an 8-hour show. And I am going to circle back with you because there are many more things I want to talk with you about. I just want to get this show out quickly because it's an important topic right now. Before people alienate any more family or friends, before we divide people anymore on, you're someone I can talk to and you're someone I'll never speak to again. Before we feel the need to react one more time in one more way, I would love for this show to close on you just giving advice, generally speaking, to folks out there that say, I know I'm not in a good place. I wake up every day feeling a bit of a heavy heart and like I'm wondering where the world is going. And by the end of the day, I literally have to drag myself to bed, and I dread thinking what tomorrow brings. From that place, as you and I just spoke, the ability to have a healthy, good relationship, feeling like that, the ability to be a great contributor in whatever your work is that you do is going to be greatly challenged. The ability to be healthy is going to be very problematic because your impetus for wanting to get out and work out when everything, it feels hard to breathe. If someone is in that space and saying, Michael, look out at the world. Michael, jump on social media. You have to be real about the world we're in. And you're wanting me to say, here's how I can turn it all around and be more resilient. I love what you said. We're not going from step 1 to step 100 today, but we got to get to step 2. We got to have our eyes down the road. How do we today, someone listening right now, how do we get a little more optimism, a little more hope, a little more personal responsibility, shifting the focus off the world? Because a lot of things we can't change today. But what we can do is look at ourselves. What can you leave the audience with of saying, folks, today, if this is how you're feeling, focus on this?
That's a great question. And all things being equal, all the stuff we talked about that needs to be worked on. Yes, all that stuff needs to be worked on. One of the big lessons I learned, because I got to spend a lot of time with the Navy SEALs in my training and work and stuff, is taking your eyes off yourself. They're team oriented. And I watch these guys in training evolutions where they go after the guy who's very agenic. I'm a tough guy. I'm capable of doing this stuff, and they keep crushing this guy until you realize he's a part of a boat crew and he gets his eyes off himself and he gets to help his fellow boat crew members. I love that. And I literally did a post on social media on the Good Samaritan. Take your eyes off yourself for a moment and find someone else who needs your help, your love, your care, your compassion, listening to them, carrying their groceries across the street, buying them food if they're hungry, just having a conversation with them. The scale could be anything, whatever the thing is. Get your eyes off yourself just for a little bit of time and help someone else. You're helping someone else, which is a really beautiful thing in this world these days, but you're also generating inside yourself like hope and even like a sense of gratitude, like wow, because if you can help someone else, it's going to be people who can also help you too, and that it's just like a force multiplier over time. So I would say eyes off self, help someone else while also doing all stuff that I think would benefit you as well.
I love that. I think that is phenomenal closing, ending advice for folks is exactly that is think about what you can do to contribute. Think about what you can do in your little world. And look at I'm going to throw this out there. You know what you can do to contribute? Not comment negatively. If you can't contribute in a good way, what did we learn in kindergarten? Can't say something nice. You know what? If your day isn't going to be spent trying to find a way to contribute positively, at the bare minimum, don't contribute negatively. It's just not helpful, not to them or to you. And I'm gonna agree with you on this point wholeheartedly. And there have been numerous studies done on this that you doing something good for somebody else has equally, absolutely the benefit to you on every level in every way just by doing good. Same can be said for negativity. You thinking you're
Oh
throwing a
yeah.
dagger at someone else, you know that line, handing somebody poison, yet you're the one who's drinking it, is insanely important, especially right now. So contribute in a positive, meaningful way. Take Michael's advice, take those 3 breaths, check in with your values. How are you showing up? What are you, when you look back at yourself a year from now, going to be proud of during these times that you held it together and you were that shining light when the world needed it? And I'm going to tell you, today is a good day to start to be that shining light. There's never a time where it's too late because the world needs you. So the world needs you, Michael. Thank you for everything you're
Thanks.
doing. If people want to learn more about how to be more resilient and optimize their resilience, and I'm telling you, if there's somebody that you need to follow and check in with and learn more about and work with, it's Michael. You've heard it right here. Michael, how can they find you? How can they work with you? Where can they connect?
I appreciate that. So my website's Michael, Michael, the letter D as in my middle name, David, Ostrolenk, Ostrolenk.com, M Ostrolenk on Twitter, M Ostrolenk on Instagram, Michael D. Ostrolenk on Facebook, and LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. And if they did want to work with you, what type of coaching do you do? Do you one-on-one coaching, group coaching? How do you work?
That's great. Thank you for asking. So, 3 different programs that I offer. I have a 6-month program for individuals. It's a human optimization program. We dial in your physiology, your psychology, your social relationships, and your environments for optimization. 6-month coaching program for couples that I work with. And then I co lead a men's group called Resilience Optimized Men's Group with JC Glick, who's a former Army Ranger.
Perfect. Well, you have lots of options. All of them, everybody should look into. All of that is also going to be in show notes with clickable links. So feel free to jump over to thegamechangerpodcast.com and you can click on all of that and go directly. So thank you, Michael, for your time today, not
Thanks,
only
Michelle.
on 9/11, but it doesn't matter when somebody's listening to this, your information is invaluable. So I appreciate you very much for being here. And thank you all for tuning in to this episode of the Game Changer Podcast.